I Am a Thief, I Am a Murderer, by Sergio de Soto, the official blog. Sergio de Soto. That is the honest sentence, not metaphor, not literary device. If I weigh my life against the weight of TVRH Torah, I have taken what was not mine, and I have spilled what was not mine to spill. So have you. The day we learn to say it without flinching is the day we are ready to read Luke 23 again. Because we have been reading it wrong. The thief on the cross is the most weaponized passage in Western soteriology. It is the verse that gets pulled out the moment anyone in the room mentions obedience or baptism or feasts or fringes. See the thief, the argument goes, he did nothing. He believed and he was saved. End of conversation. And with that one swing, 2,000 years of Hebraic root gets cleared like brush. I want to walk back into that story slowly. I want to take the misconceptions one at a time. But before I touch a single misconception, we need to settle one word, because if we do not settle this word, every argument that follows will collapse back into the same shallow ditch we are trying to climb out of. The word that holds everything. The Hebrew word for salvation is Yeshav, Yeshua, same root as the name of Yeshua, Jesus. His mother did not name him the one who issues afterlife tickets. She named him YHWH saves, YHWH makes whole, YHWH rescues. Yeshua is used over 70 times in the Tanakh. Read every occurrence. You will find a C parted, Yeshavh, Yeshua, Shamvat, Exodus 14:13. You will find a king delivered from his enemies, Yeshav, Yeshua, Thylim, Psalm 3:8. You will find wells of joy drawn from springs, Yeshav, Yeshua, Yeshyav, Isaiah 12:3. What you will not find, not once, is the Hebrew word for salvation used to mean going to heaven when you die. That construct is not in the Tanakh. It is not in the mouth of Yeshua. It is not in the mouth of Shaul, Paul. It is a Greco-Roman graft, downstream of Plato, hardened by centuries of Augustinian and medieval theology, and finally packaged for the American revival tent. The Hebrew word at the root of every claim Yeshua makes about salvation is wholeness. The fence around the word shalom, shalom, is the same fence. Shalem, whole. Shalom, the state of being whole. Yeshua, the act of being made whole. To be saved is to be restored. Body, mind, breath, conscience, community, covenant, all of it, brought back into right alignment under the one who made you. Now read Luke 23 again with that word in your mouth instead of a ticket in your hand. The story is not about a man getting his afterlife paperwork stamped at the last second. The story is about a man being made whole on a Roman cross. What the thief actually did. Tradition says he did nothing. The text says otherwise. In a span of perhaps an hour, while bleeding out from iron spikes, the thief next to Yeshua does at least 5 things. He rebukes evil. He turns to the other criminal and shuts him down. Do you not even fear God, seeing you are under the same condemnation? Luke 23:40. That is a public rebuke of mockery in front of a hostile crowd while in agony. Try it sometime when you are merely tired. He confesses guilt. We indeed justly, for we receive the due reward of our deeds. Luke 23:41. No deflection, no I had a hard childhood, no the system put me here. He owns the rap sheet. That is tshvbh, teshuva, the Hebrew word for repentance, which does not mean feeling bad. It means turning. He turns, he defends the innocent. But this man has done nothing wrong. Luke 23:41. He becomes a witness for Yeshua in the only court that mattered that afternoon, the court of public memory. The gospel writer recorded it. So did the centurion standing under the cross. He confesses the kingship of Yeshua. Yeshua, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Luke 23:42. He sees through the blood and the mockery and the sign nailed above the head, and he calls him king. The disciples were hiding. This man, a convicted criminal, makes the confession. He surrenders. He stops trying to save his body. He asks only to be remembered. There is no negotiation, no ladder of self-justification, no bargain. He simply lets go. That is not nothing. That is Ishva, Yeshua breaking in. A man being made whole in the last hour he has. A thief, a murderer, restored to right alignment under his king while the nails are still in him. What he did not do is also worth saying. He did not get baptized. He did not keep a single feast. He did not put on tzitzit. He did not finish out a discipled life of obedience. He had no time. The cross does not allow time. and this is exactly where the argument from his case becomes a category error. The category error that built a theology. You cannot build a normative doctrine of salvation on an edge case mid-execution. The thief is not the model for a 30-year-old believer with 40 years of life ahead of her. The thief is the model for a person at the threshold of death, with nothing left to give but recognition of the King. To take that scene and turn it into the template for every disciple who will live a full life after Pentecost is to commit the same error a doctor would commit by treating every patient with the regimen used for someone in the last 60 minutes of life. The thief is honored. The thief is held up. The thief is loved by Yeshua to the last breath. But the thief is not the blueprint. He is the mercy at the edge. Everything we know about discipleship from the rest of the text. From the mode, appointed times of Vicare, Leviticus 23 onward, from the tzitzit of BMDBR, Numbers 15, from the daily walk Yeshua taught and modeled, is the blueprint. Confusing the mercy at the edge with the blueprint in the center is how we got a Christianity where the goal of life is the right deathbed sentence rather than a life made whole. A word, before we go further, for the one who needs it. None of this is a verdict on the dying. The mercy that reached the thief reaches the dying still. The argument of this piece is not that last-hour faith does not save. The argument is that last-hour faith is not the template for the 40-year life. If you have lost someone whose final hour held only a glimpse of the King, read this whole piece as a defense of that glimpse and a refusal to let the institution cheapen it by turning it into a marketing template. The thief was honored. So is the one you lost. So is your grieving. Do not read the church's misuse of the thief as a denial of the thief himself. The shortcut human nature wants. Before we talk about the church that packaged the shortcut for sale, we have to be honest about why the shortcut sells. It sells because human nature buys it gladly. This is how a person without the discipline of the text instinctively reads Luke 23. The thief said, I believe, everything is good, I am forgiven, I go to heaven. 5 words and a glance toward the King. Done. That is the version we want. We want it because it is short. We want it because it costs nothing. We want it because if it worked for him, then the same 5 words and the same glance will work for us. This is not a Christian habit. It is a human habit. We want the wedding day without the marriage. We want the diploma without the 4 years. We want the body without the gym. We want the harvest without the planting. We have always wanted recognition without transformation. And we have always been willing to read sacred texts in whatever way most quickly grants us that wish. So we read the thief as the model, not the mercy. We read his hour as our template, not his edge. We read his 5 words as our shortcut, not his last breath. We make him into the patron saint of, I do not have to change anything, I just have to believe a sentence is true. The text does not authorize that reading. The text shows a man being made whole in his final hour by rebuking evil, confessing guilt, defending the innocent, confessing the King, and surrendering his body. We covered this. But human nature does not want a story of wholeness through turning. It wants a story of recognition without turning. So we file off everything the thief actually did and leave only the bare recognition. Then we hold up the plain down version and call it the gospel. This is not the gospel. This is the gospel after human nature got finished editing it. Yeshua named this disease by its Hebrew name when he quoted Isaiah against the Pharisees. Their worship had become MTS vit anshim elmdich, mitzvat anashim melumada, commandments of men learned by rote. Matthew 15:9 YSHYV, Isaiah 29:13. The Pharisees did it with their fence of the fence around hand-washing. The modern church does it with 5-word salvation prayers. Different content, same disease. The shortcut is always a doctrine of men taught as the Word of God. The Hebraic answer to human nature is not to call you decrepit. It is to call you to teshuvah, turning, and kedusha, set-apartness, by the one whose image you bear. The thief turned. So can we. But turning is the cost, and the cost is exactly what the human shortcut wants to skip. Easy believism and the manufactured deathbed. The modern church figured out that very few people get a literal cross next to Yeshua, so it manufactured a substitute. It is called by different names: easy believism, cheap grace in Bonhoeffer's old phrase, decisional regeneration when the academics get involved. But the everyday name for it is one most of us were handed before we knew what to do with it. The sinner's prayer. You know the script. Lord Jesus, I know I am a sinner. I believe you died for my sins. I accept you into my heart. Save me. Amen. The pastor counts hands. The number gets reported at the next deacon's meeting. The new convert is told that whatever happens next, the matter is settled. Eternally, no further questions. The prayer is not in the Bible. Look for it. You will not find it in the mouth of Yeshua. You will not find it in the mouth of any of the Talmudim, disciples. You will not find it in Acts, where the first 3,000 believers were told to repent and be immersed, Acts 2:38, not to repeat a formula. You will not find it in Shaul, who described conversion as dying, being buried, and rising with Messiah, Romans 6, not as raising a hand at an altar call. The sinner's prayer, in the form most of us were taught, is a 19th and 20th century revivalist instrument. It is a modern, manufactured deathbed, the same logic that took the thief on the cross and made him the template for every disciple now takes one moment of recited words and makes it the template for an entire life. The edge case has been industrialized, and the result is exactly what you would predict. Millions of people have been told that a sentence prayed at a youth camp at age 12 sealed the question forever, regardless of whether the life that followed bore any resemblance to TSH Vaba Teshuva, turning, to KDVSH Kedusha, set-apartness, to the wholeness Yeshua actually names. They are told their assurance does not depend on their life, their fruit, their walk, or their relationship to TVRH, Torah. Only on the prayer. Hear me carefully. The lie is not in the prayer itself. A prayer at a youth camp at age 12 has often been the honest first turn of a heart that then spent decades growing into the wholeness it half named. The spirit is not bound by our scripts. The lie is in the institution telling the praying child that the prayer was the end of the matter, when in truth it could only ever have been the beginning. The institution stole the rest of her invitation. The prayer was not the fraud. The framing around it was, this is easy believism. It is not the gospel. It is the gospel's cheaper, faster substitute, marketed at scale. Yeshua never offered it. He offered something heavier and better. He offered a life, a daily walked-out life under the King. He told his hearers to count the cost before they followed. Luke 14:28. He told them that not everyone who said, Lord, Lord, would enter, but only the one doing the will of his Father, Matthew 7:21. He defined his own followers as those who keep my commandments, John 14-15, and as those who abide in my word, John 8:31. Not those who recited the right sentence one summer evening in 1987. The gospel is not a transaction you completed at age 12. I went deep on that in The Gospel is not a transaction. You didn't recite a prayer and the transactional frame steals the very thing it claims to give. The thief on the cross was given mercy at the edge because the edge was all he had. The young believer at a youth camp has decades. To take her decades and tell her they were all settled in 30 seconds is to rob her of the gospel of being made whole. It is not kind, it is theft. It is the very thing the title of this piece names me for. I am a thief. So is any teacher who steals a person's lifelong invitation to wholeness and hands them a scripted prayer in its place. The grovel as a leash. Human nature wants the shortcut. The institution sold the shortcut. There is one more move, and it is the ugliest of the three, because it is the move that keeps the customer in the building once the sale has closed. Once you have been handed the cheap ticket, the institution has a problem. You might leave. You might notice that the ticket has not actually changed anything in you. You might start asking questions about the mode, about Shabbat, about Tzitzit, about why Yeshua and the Talmudim all looked like observant first-century Jews while your pastor looks like a Republican on a coffee mug. Most pastors are not malicious. They were handed the same theology they hand you, by men who were handed it by men who were handed it. The system is older than the pastor in front of you, and many of them are doing their honest best inside an inherited framework they have never been given permission to question. That does not change the inherited problem. It does change the target of your questions. Aim them at the theology, not the man, and once you start aiming, the leash gets pulled. The leash is shame. Look closely at the message most of us were soaked in from the pulpit. You are a worm. You are nothing without the cross. You are wretched, undone, depraved to the root. Your righteousness is filthy rags. You deserve hell and nothing else. Without me, the institution holding the prayer and the ritual and the membership card, you are lost beyond hope. Repeat that message twice a week for 30 years and watch what it does to a person. It works exactly as designed. not as a Hebraic anthropology, as a control mechanism. A person taught to think of himself as decrepit, worthless, and groveling will be a dependent, manageable member of any institution that promises to keep him out of the fire. He will not push back on the inconsistencies of his pastor's teaching because pushing back requires standing, and he has been taught he has no standing. He will not study the Hebrew himself because study requires the dignity of a workman, and he has been taught he is not a workman, he is a worm. He will not walk out because walking out requires a self-worth taking with him, and he has been taught the self is nothing. The doctrine doing this damage has a name, and it has eaten through more believers than the church will admit. The doctrine that ate itself, what total depravity actually, takes that doctrine apart sentence by sentence. This is not what YHWH says about you. Open bracket Genesis 1:27 with your own eyes. And Elohim created the man in his own image. In the image of Elohim he created him, male and female he created them. The Hebrew is TSLM, tselem, image, not shadow, not echo, image. You bear the imprint of the one who made you. Sin has wounded that image. Sin has not erased it. Open the same Tanakh and listen to how YHWH addresses his people. Beloved, chosen, a treasured possession, Sel Segula, Shamvat, Exodus 19:5. A kingdom of priests, Mem MLKH Kanim, Mamlashe Kohanim, Shamvat, Exodus 19:6. The apple of his eye, Dibrim, Deuteronomy 32:10. Crowned with KHBVD, Kavod, glory, weight, honor, and majesty, Thylim, Psalm 8:5. Listen to Yeshua, you are of more value than many sparrows, Matthew 10:31. I have called you friends, John 15:15. Listen for the word worm applied to the human as a permanent identity. You will not find it. You will find one place where the suffering servant uses worm language about himself in agony, Thylim, Psalm 22:6. And that is Messiah speaking of the cross, not a description of what we are. The Hebraic anthropology is not you are nothing. The Hebraic anthropology is you are something dignified by your Maker, wounded by sin, and being made whole by the one who calls you by name. Confession is part of being made whole. Groveling is something else entirely. Confession sees the wrong, names it, turns from it, and is restored to its standing as a son or daughter. Groveling stays in the dirt because someone in a pulpit needs the customer on the floor to keep selling the lift up. Look at the thief one more time. He does not grovel. Read the text. He confesses, we indeed justly. He defends, this man has done nothing wrong. And he addresses the king by name and asks to be remembered. He talks to Yeshua like a man, not like a worm. He is dignified, even in his guilt, and Yeshua answers him in kind. This is the difference between Hebraic confession and institutional groveling. Confession restores dignity. Groveling steals it and calls the theft humility. If your spiritual life is built on the conviction that you are decrepit, hopeless, and worth nothing, you have not met the gospel. You have met a leash. The gospel of Yeshua meets you in your real guilt, names your real condition, and restores you to your real worth as one who bears the Salem of the Most High. The cross does not exist to keep you small. The cross exists to bring you home. Whole people walk out of churches that need them small. They do not walk out into pride. They walk out into the long, slow, dignified work of being made whole. Confession without groveling, obedience without earning, worship without a leash. The veil is torn. I need to say one thing as plainly as I can say anything in this piece. If you have ever felt unworthy to come before YHWH, you were wrong. Not wrong about your sin. You may have plenty of sin, and so do I. Wrong about what your sin disqualifies you from. It does not disqualify you from approach. It is the very thing you came to bring him. You are his creation. You are his ma'aseh, mush, handiwork, work of his hands. Thylim, Psalm 138:8. Do not forsake the works of your hands. Yeshua, Isaiah 64:8. We are the clay. You are our potter. All of us are the work of your hand. Shaul uses the Greek poema, workmanship, literally the root of our word poem, in Ephesians 2:10. You are not an accident. You are not garbage. You are something made by someone on purpose, and that someone has not stopped loving his work because the work cracked. The institutional system needs you to feel unfit to approach him directly. If you are unfit, you need a mediator. If you need a mediator, you need the institution that sells the mediation. That is the business model. The model only works as long as the customer believes the veil between him and the Holy One is intact, and only the priest holds the key. The veil is torn. Read Luke carefully. Luke 23:45, in the very same scene as the thief. The sun was darkened, and the veil of the temple was torn in two. The parkht, parashe, the veil that separated the holy place from the most holy place, the curtain that no one but the high priest could cross, on one day a year, with blood, with fear, in case he was struck dead, was torn. Top to bottom, Matthew 27:51, Mark 15:38. YWH did it himself, not the priests, not the institution. YWH, ripping his own curtain with his own hand, while his son was on the wood and a thief was being made whole next to him. The veil and the thief are in the same chapter for a reason. They are arguing the same point, direct access, mediated only by Messiah, not by an institution. The thief had no priest standing between him and his king. He had no temple, no sacrifice in his hand, no ritual purity, no membership card, no doctrinal statement signed in triplicate. He had his guilt, his king, and his voice. And the king answered him. That is what the torn veil means. It means anyone who would put a curtain back up between you and YHWH is doing the institutional equivalent of needlework on something his own hand tore. Whatever they are sewing is not from him. I wrote about that needlework once. In The Veil Tore, the church sewed it back, because the institution did exactly that. The torn curtain offended the system sewed. Submit to him directly, not to the man who tells you that you cannot reach him directly, not to the institution that needs you to believe you are too unfit to approach. The Father in heaven loves his handiwork, and his handiwork is you. The Hebrew for that love is achba, ahava, a love that binds itself with covenant force. The Greek is agape, the same love bent into action. This is not the institution's mood. This is YHWH's posture toward his own handiwork. The cracked, guilty, repenting, turning, learning, slowly being made whole you that he has been calling by name since before the foundation of the world. The thief shows us this. He did not pray a sinner's prayer. He did not get baptized. He did not join a congregation. He did not check his theology against a creed. He turned to the king who was bleeding next to him and spoke. That was enough, because the king is enough, and the veil between them was being torn at that exact moment. If a system has taught you that you cannot approach unless you go through it, the system has lied. The veil is torn. Walk in. Today and the missing comma. One more thing about Luke 23:43 itself, because the misconception runs through the verse's punctuation. Luke 23:43. In most English Bibles reads, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." Notice the comma. The comma decides the meaning. Move it one word to the right and the verse reads, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." The Greek manuscripts have no punctuation. The Greek word semeron, today, sits in the middle, and where you draw the line is an interpretive choice. Some Syriac and Aramaic manuscript traditions attach it to "I tell you," which is also a common Semitic idiom, "Amen, I say to you today." That construction appears throughout Deuteronomy. Why does this matter? Because Yeshua himself was not in paradise that day. He was in the grave for 3 days and 3 nights, Matthew 12:40. He told Miriam, Mary Magdalene, at the resurrection that he had not yet ascended to the Father, John 20:17. If today attaches to "you will be," we have a contradiction. If today attaches to "I tell you," we have a Hebrew idiom doing what Hebrew idioms do. I am not going to pretend the comma is settled. It is contested. I am only going to say this. A theology of instant transit to heaven at the moment of death, leaning the whole weight of its case on a contested comma in a single verse, in a single edge case scene, is a theology built on a knife's edge. Paradise is not what you were told it is. And even granting the most common reading, there is one more word to settle. Paradisos, paradise, is a Persian loanword. Pardes, an enclosed garden. The LX uses it for Eden. Second Temple Jewish writings use it for the Garden of the Righteous Dead, a holding place, not the throne room of God. The thief is told he will be with Yeshua in the Pardes. He is not told he will be teleported to the celestial city to receive a mansion. He is told he will be with his king in the garden. The Hebraic imagination here is Edenic, not skyward. The promise is wholeness restored, the original garden reopened, the man and his king together again under the trees of life. This is Ishva, Yeshua, not relocation, restoration. Now, the side door, baptism. Here is where the same misconception turns inside out and pretends to be its opposite. The same tradition that uses the thief to prove no works necessary will often, in the next sentence, teach that baptism is required for salvation. Acts 2:38 gets quoted. Mark 16:16 gets quoted. The pastor will say with full conviction that without water immersion you are not saved. The Hebrew names matter. The act is tpils, tevila, the immersion. The pool of living waters in which it happens is the mkvh, mikvah. The framework existed long before Yochanan John baptized in the Jordan. Observant Jews were immersing in mikvahot for ritual purification centuries before the apostolic writings were ink on parchment. The institution that requires tevilah as the entry pass to salvation is treating an ancient Jewish purification practice as the New Testament's replacement for Torah, which is the very move the tradition claims to repudiate. The Hebraic frame on immersion is laid out in full in the mikvah beneath the water, which the rest of this baptism argument depends on. And the reader who has been told her tradition has nothing to do with Jewish ritual practice is at this moment standing in the very practice she was told no longer applies. Stop and notice what just happened. If baptism is necessary for salvation, then baptism is a commandment that, if not kept, costs you everything. That is the definition of a law. A required act with a penalty attached. Not a suggestion, not a sign. A law. And if that law is in force after the resurrection, you have just affirmed New Testament law, which means the entire framework of the law was nailed to the cross. We are under grace, no commandments apply, has just collapsed in your own mouth. You have law. You just have a smaller, hand-picked, Gentile-friendly subset of it that no one in your tradition is willing to name as Torah. This is not me playing rhetorical games. This is the structure of your own argument turned around and shown to you. If there is law, then there is law. You cannot have a partial Torah. You cannot keep the commandment your tradition built a building around, the baptismal font, and discard the commandments YHWH himself spoke from Sinai. If baptism is binding, then SHBT, Shabbat, is binding. Yeshua kept it. The Talmudim kept it. Shaul kept it for the whole book of Acts. If baptism is binding, then the mode of Vikra, Leviticus 23, are binding. Read Vikra, Leviticus 23:2 carefully. These are the appointed times of YHWH, not of Israel, not of Moses, of YHWH. They are his calendar. He did not give it to one ethnic group and revoke it for the rest. He gave it to humanity through Israel. If baptism is binding, then Tzitzit are binding. BMDBR, Numbers 15:38-39. Speak to the children of Israel and bid them to make for themselves fringes on the corners of their garments throughout their generations, and that they put on the fringe of each corner a cord of blue. And it shall be to you for a fringe, that you may look upon it and remember all the commandments of YHWH. Yeshua wore them, the Greek word kraspedon, in Matthew 9:20 and Matthew 14:36. The hem of his garment that the woman with the issue of blood reached for is the same word the LXX uses to translate TSYTST, tzitzit, in BMDBR, Numbers 15. The man whose name is Yeshua wore the fringes that remind a person of the commandments. If you are imitating him, you are not imitating him without them. I am not saying this to be combative. I am saying this because the inconsistency has gone uncalled for too long. If you teach baptism as required, teach Torah as required. If you teach Torah as nailed to the cross, then teach baptism as a sign and not a requirement. Pick a column, live in it. Stop building walls out of the bricks you keep insisting do not exist. The cord that holds it. Here is where the strands meet. The thief on the cross argument and the baptism required argument both stand on the same foundation. Salvation as a ticket, a transaction, a line you cross at a specific moment, after which you are in and before which you are out. The first uses the thief to prove the ticket is free. The second uses baptism to prove the ticket costs one specific ritual. Both presuppose the same vending machine. They only argue about the coin. Yeshua is not a ticket. It is the act of being made whole. It is what happened to the thief in the last hour of his life. He was restored to right alignment under his king. It is also what is supposed to happen to you across the 40 years you have left. Not in an hour, because you have more than an hour. Slowly, through Torah, through Shabbat, through the Mode, through the daily prayer of the Shema, through the fringes that remind you who you are, through the long obedience that the early disciples knew and the modern church has been taught to call legalism. Obedience is not the price of the ticket. There is no ticket. Obedience is part of being whole, just as breathing is part of being alive, just as eating is part of being nourished. You do not eat to earn your existence. You eat because you are alive, and a living thing eats. You do not obey to earn salvation. You obey because you are being made whole, and a whole person walks in the way of the one who made him. Study to show yourself approved. Shaul wrote one sentence to Timothy that, if the church had taken it seriously, would have prevented most of what this article is trying to dismantle. Be diligent to present yourself approved to God, a workman who does not need to be ashamed, rightly handling the word of truth. 2 Timothy 2:15. The older translations render the first verb as study. The Greek is spoudason, which carries the sense of make every effort, be eager, give diligence. It is not casual reading. It is the kind of work a craftsman puts in before he is willing to put his name on the piece. And the phrase rightly handling is orthotomeo, literally to cut straight. It is the language of a stonemason cutting a true edge, or a farmer plowing a straight furrow. Handle the word like a craftsman handling his tools. Cut it straight. Do not curve it to fit the tradition you inherited. If you have been told that the thief on the cross settles every soteriological question, that the sinner's prayer is the entry door, and that obedience is a threat to grace, you have been handed a curved tool. The way out is not to find a teacher with a better tool. The way out is to learn to cut straight yourself. I just bought a Brown Driver Briggs Hebrew English lexicon. For anyone outside the world of biblical languages, BDB is the standard Hebrew lexicon. It is the reference Hebraists and serious students of the Tanakh have leaned on for over a century. I bought it for one reason. I am tired of taking other people's word for what the Hebrew says. When I open Isaiah 12:3 and read about drawing water from the wells of Yeshua, I want to see the entry for that word with my own eyes. Every shade of meaning, every other place it occurs, every cognate, every grammatical note. I want the workman's tool in my hand, not a translator's three-word gloss. This is what study to show yourself approved looks like in practice. It is not anti-intellectual surrender to whatever your pastor said last Sunday. It is not blind acceptance of whatever your study Bible's footnote suggested. It is the long, slow, sometimes tedious work of opening the text in its own language and letting it tell you what it says. A craftsman buys his tools. He sharpens them. He learns to use them well, and he does not blame the wood when his cuts come out crooked. He goes back and learns to cut straight. You do not need to be a Hebrew scholar to begin. You need a lexicon, a willingness to be wrong about things you have believed for a long time, and the slow patience of someone who would rather be right with YHWH than comfortable in a tradition. Start with one word a week. Start with Yeshua. Start with Shalom. Start with TVRH, Torah. Watch what happens to your reading of the whole text within a year. This is the antidote to easy believism. It is also the antidote to the inverse error of legalistic checkbox religion. Both errors share one root. Someone else is doing your thinking. Cut it straight yourself. The text is in your hand. Back to the cross. Now look at the thief one more time. He was made whole in an hour because that is what he had. We are given longer. The mercy that reached him in an hour reaches us across decades, and we are responsible for the decades, not as a price, as a life. He could not be baptized. He could not keep a feast. He could not put on tzitzit. None of that condemns him, because the one making him whole was reaching him at the edge. The same one reaches you in the middle, where there is time. And in the middle, the question is not, what is the minimum I can do and still get the ticket? The question is, what does a whole life under my king actually look like? It looks like Yeshua. It looks like a Jewish man on a Galilean hillside with tzitzit on the corners of his garment, keeping the mode, opening the scroll on Shabbat, telling the truth to the religious establishment, healing the broken, dying as a thief beside thieves, and rising as the firstborn of a renewed creation. I am a thief, I am a murderer, and the one next to me on the wood is making me whole. That is the gospel, not a ticket, a garden being reopened, a man being put back together, a king who wore the fringes and remembered every commandment of his father, dying in the place of the thief so the thief could come home. If that is the gospel, then start living like a person being made whole. Keep the Shabbat, walk the mode, put on the fringes, read the TVRH Torah his mouth fed on, and stop, finally, treating his cross as a turnstile. He did not die so you could get past a turnstile. He died so you could be made whole. There is a difference. The difference is the entire Bible. Selah. Sit with these before you move on. Can you say, I am a thief, I am a murderer, without flinching? If you cannot, what is the version of yourself you are still defending in front of the one who already sees? If you were handed a sentence at age 12 and told the question was settled forever, what did the decades since cost you? Is there a way back to those decades? If you removed the worm language from the message you were given about yourself, what is left of your spiritual identity? Whose name is signing your worth? Who is standing between you and YHWH this week, and was he the one who placed them there? Are you willing to learn one Hebrew word a week for a year, and let the result be different from what your tradition prepared you to find? May the shalom of our Abba guard your study and your wrestling, shalom v'shalva. Your brother in the way, Sergio.